The Fairburn Sykes fighting knife, one of the most iconic designs from all time. Join me in the rest of this video to see how I put together the Branco Customs version. The design we put together with my client with a few little tweaks from the original design. It was to be built from 5.5mm thick B-Cut Niobium steel, brass pommel, brass guard, and a handle with alternating light and dark woods. We ended up opting for some raffia stabilised burl poplar and also some beautiful African black ebony. The first step is preparing the steel, which actually came in at about 6mm thick. So I run it on a 240 grit belt and smooth it down to about just under 6. I then trim out a size for size template from my CAD drawing and glue it to the steel, which I then take the angle grinder to rough cut the approximate profile. I selected this B-Cut Niobium Stainless steel for a few reasons, but A, it's got great edge retention, it's a very tough steel, it's available in 6mm thick, and also it's stainless steel, so it'll leave for a maintenance-free blade. I then take the design over to the 2x72 grinder in order to take the steel precisely up to the lines on the printed CAD drawing. It's essential for this design being a dagger that is symmetrical in every which way. I also make sure the tang of this is 12mm wide by 6mm thick and with a slight taper on it, so we can slide each section of the handle on with ease. I also grind off the square corners of the tang so that the holes in the handle material are as small as possible, with the most chance of them being robust for a long, durable history. I roughly round off the very end of the tang in preparation for fitting the thread for the pommel that's going to screw on there in the end. Here you can see me using some thread cutting dies in order to cut firstly a 6mm thread all the way over there, and then I reduced that down to a 5mm M5 thread. The next step is to start relieving a slot in the brass material that we're going to use for the guard. To do this, I take the piece of brass, fully marked up and dimensionally accurate, over to the milling machine where I drill a couple of holes through it and then finish it off with a small 4mm carbide end mill. Then the rest of the very precise fitment is done with needle files. Here I make very small adjustments, some to the guard, some to the knife, in order to make sure everything lines up perfectly. So moving on to the pommel, I start with a large piece of brass that I cut down to size and then square the ends in order to make sure everything is going to sit nice and square when it goes onto the lathe. Once chucked up in the lathe, I use a small center drill in order to make a little witness mark where the thread is going to go up the inside of the brass tube. That's then drilled out even further and threaded. Quick test fit on the quality of the threads, make sure everything's going together nicely before we continue finishing off the rest of the pommel. I then fit a piece of sacrificial M5 threaded rod up the inside of the pommel and use that to attach it into the lathe, so that will be the central axis for all the rest of the shaping. And in order to create the overall profile, a lot of hand tools are used, including small little lathe tools that I work by hand, and also just general files and sandpaper. Quick run through my bead blaster with a nice, very fine grit, high quality glass bead leaves this beautiful satin sheen. Next, I turn my attention to the handle. I start off by cleaning up the nice piece of African black ebony and then marking it so that we can cut it on the bandsaw to start making the roundels. I flatten each piece whilst it's a large block in order to make sure that everything's going to be parallel when we glue them all together. Each section of handle is then numbered and then taken over to the pillar drill in order to make a hole slap bang in the center, which will be the beginning of where we'll make the slot. I set up a little jig so that I could machine, again with the 6mm carbide end mill, the perfect clearance so that we'd be left with the maximum amount of wood material that we'd just be able to slide the tang of the knife through and no more. I milled the slots in each piece one at a time, fitting it onto the tang, checking for tightness, and then moving on to the next. So here you'll see my reason for drilling the central hole in each piece of handled material comes clear. I wanted to be able to thread all the pieces back onto a spindle that I would then be able to put into the lathe in order to turn the circular handle at the end. So this is exactly what I did. I carefully slid all the pieces over whilst they were glued into position, so that I could then end up with a monolithic handle that I can then square off and put back in the lathe. I decided that it was best to round the block as much as possible on the grinder before then taking it to the lathe. This way everything would run much more smoothly when starting with something that was generally circular. At the same time, here you can see me effectively changing the profile of one of the lathe tools that I will use later on to put the grooves into the handle. It started off as just a square-ended bit for machining things, and now I'm just turning it into a bullnose shape to use to make the grooves. Here again you can see me using a combination of different hand tools in order to start shaping the handle. After sanding the handle up to about a 1200 grit, I apply a nice little bit of Renaissance wax so we can see the final finish. Then being able to see the beautiful wood, we go in with the tool that I just reshaped in order to put the grooves in between every segment. I use the dials on the linear slide on the lathe tool in order to ensure that each ring is a precise distance apart and a precise depth into the handle. And again, a little bit of Renaissance wax at the end to bring out a nice sheen. Next, we skip back a little bit to look at the shaping of the guard. Here I mark out on the brass the shape that we need, clean up all the sides, and then take it to the grinder to get it to a nice oval shape. I use the hardened steel verniers as a scribe in order to mark positions for putting the chamfer at an even thickness all the way around the rim. A quick polish to remove any micro imperfections and blend all the surfaces together, and then it's into the glass bead blast to put that nice satin finish. And here you can see the after effects of me soldering the guard onto the blade using a very special low temperature solder, which then leaves an awful amount of redoing for cleaning up the surfaces and getting them back to be as nice as they were before. Somewhere along the lines I've mislaid the footage that I took of grinding the actual hollow into the dagger. However, here you can see the after effects once you've done some hand sanding of a quick dip in some acid to get the nice final matte finish. So next, it was a bit of an odd step to do, but it was important I did it this way around, was to actually sharpen the bevels into the cutting edge of the blade. Because once I fit the circular handle, there would be no flat edges left to use as a easy reference in order to set the angle from. Normally in knife making you'd do the sharpening last of all, as it's a little bit challenging to work with a sharpened blade when fitting handles. However, in this event, this seemed the best way around to do it. From here on in, it was a simple case of sliding the handle over, lots of epoxy, and gluing and screwing on the pommel. And voila, here we go. If you like my videos and the things I create and would like to see more of it, please hit like, hit subscribe, and then if you also hit the notification bell, you'll be notified as soon as I release some new material on YouTube. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, or why not check out my website for the most comprehensive information. And if you would like to either order a custom knife for yourself or as a gift for someone, please check out my website, www.brancocustoms.com. Thank you.